Great. Hi, Tom. So we just wrapped up our 6-week experiential where we would meet once a week, and we would go through the program that you had outlined at the Monroe Institute. So
how did that work?
Awesome.
It was a great experience. It was a really great experience.
Fun.
So did everyone feel like they got as much out of it as they hoped, and maybe more?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, sure, speak for myself. I did. That first time I meditated.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We just didn't want it to end.
No. Yeah, it was lovely. Definitely added to my life in a big way. So,
So were most of you old hands at this sort of thing, or a lot of you beginners?
Beginners. I'm kind of beginner. Yeah, I'm not very disciplined with it, that's for sure.
Yeah. So thank you for providing us with the guidelines that outlined for it. It was fantastic. We had intended on all meeting again today, but then got snowed out. We got hit with a snowstorm today, so we're all just joining from the comfort of our homes.
I see.
Yeah. So yeah.
The weather here where I am has been like between 75 and 80 degrees and sunshiny.
Oh,
That sounds so good. Full forest.
Yeah, spring is already here. Spring started about middle of February.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Where's that?
I'm in Huntsville, Alabama.
Oh, okay.
Northern Alabama, just south of Tennessee.
Nice.
very nice. Well, we don't want to take up too much of your time, so I think we'll just kind of jump into it and start asking with questions, if that's all right.
Okay, that's good.
Great. Okay, so Taryn was going to start.
I'd just like to know about, so I got my numerology done, and there was this bit about a karmic debt and how from past lives I've had a laziness issue, and the fact that I don't want to work hard. I want to sort of let others do things for me. And I feel as though I was challenged in a way with a relationship that I had previously, and I feel like I kind of failed in that regard. Like I was lazy and I didn't want to work hard, so I felt like I failed the love of my life, let's say. And basically I want to know, is that it? Is that like it for me? Like is it like how, if I failed my objective, let's say, what's the point in, carrying on in that sense? Or not like I'm going to kill myself, but I mean, like, is it one chance and then that's it? And then I kind of just got to play along and just.
No, it's not like that at all. Failure is simply a lesson that needs to be learned. You should look at failure as an opportunity.
Okay.
That's the way we grow up and make progress here, is that we try, and we are whoever we are. We make mistakes. Sometimes we succeed, and more often we fail. And we look at that failure, and rather than, feeling bad about it, feeling guilty about it, or feeling like, oh, I really screwed it up, now what's left? Instead of that, it's all negative. You need to look at it and say, well, what did I learn? What are the lessons? How should I change? What is it that I need to bring to the table different next time? And then you learn those lessons, and then there's a next time, and you'll get a certain part of the way next time, and then that may fail too, but that's all right. Then you say, all right, what did I learn? You see, and it's a process of learning. That's what it's all about. It's not a process of not making mistakes. It's a process of learning from your mistakes. So mistakes should be accepted, and you should look at it and say, well, that's just who I was then.
Right.
That was me. I was just being me, but now I have an opportunity to change me, to be different, to grow up here, to learn the lesson that was there. Would have been nice if I could have learned it first, but that's not what happened. So accept it and go on with the idea that you need to change. Now, change doesn't happen just because you want to. It's not like you can say, okay, I see the lesson and I want to change, done. It's not like that. The change takes some work. It takes some effort. And you will get another opportunity to see how well you've learned your lesson, and then you'll get another opportunity after that to see how well you've learned that lesson, and so on.
Like in this lifetime, I'll get another opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Ooh,
You get opportunities. As long as you are seriously trying to grow up and change, you will get another opportunity.
Wonderful.
And generally, the opportunity is probably even better than the last one, because
Nice.
you're more grown up now, and therefore you can see things differently. And as you see things differently, well, your whole reality changes. So the next opportunity is liable to be even a better opportunity than the one that got away, because you are more ready for the growth.
Perfect. Thank you. Good. I like that.
Yeah. Now, if you don't really care about learning and you just sit around and feel sorry for yourself because you screwed it up, and it doesn't actually end up creating learning and growth on your part, then you may or may not get another opportunity, because you really haven't grown. You're not ready for another opportunity. If you had one, it would end up just like the last one. You see, there's like nothing really much to be gained there. But as long as you're growing, you're learning, and now you think you got a better handle on it, the system will give you another opportunity. And like I say, usually they're even better.
Perfect. Thank you.
Carly, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah. So my question is, how can I heal my body quickly and maintain a mindset that supports perfect health? So I've pretty much my whole life, I've been struggling with digestive issues, and not sure if they stem from a genetic problem or just because of my diet, but my diet definitely affects my condition. And I've changed my diet greatly in the past and made it better, but I've never completely been able to heal myself. And I get pretty frustrated about trying to be disciplined and eating like the whole foods and cutting out all of the processed foods that really affect me. And I'm just wondering if there's a way I can change the way that I think to make that transition or make that commitment more efficient, or help me be able to like commit to something that really helps my physical condition.
Yes, there is. You are probably in some ways trying too hard. If you get too focused on what it is you're not, you see you're not healthy, you have these intestinal issues and so on. And if you focus on what you're not, and you actually see where you'd like to go in terms of the negative of what you don't want. I don't want these constant, digestion issues. I don't want this, I don't want that. I don't want to eat this food that I really do like. And if it's all in terms of what you don't want, you generally don't make so much progress that way, because you're really putting energy into the don't side. That's the primary thing. So in that sense, I'm thinking you're probably trying too hard, because the more you try to get a result, the more you're focused on you don't like where you are and you want to change. But be positive. Keep a positive attitude.
Right.
The positive attitude is, I'll eat these things that are better for me, because they're better for me. And besides, you will learn to like them. Oh, I like them better. It's not like, oh, now I got to eat, this, I got to eat mush now because, this mush is healthy, but I really don't want to. What I really want is, steak and eggs and, a bottle of beer, but that's not good for me, so I'll eat the mush. Well, you do it, you make yourself do it, but you're not really doing it from a positive thing. You have to learn to like the mush. You have to like it better than the steak, and eggs and beer. You have to feel good when you're eating those things. So it's a positive attitude toward what you're doing. Often these ailments that are systemic, like digestion issues, or often back pain, or there's a lot of other things that we get that are that are kind of general, non-specific things. There's this problem, but you really can't pinpoint exactly what that problem is. And it's sometimes it's more and sometimes it's less, and it's really hard to pin it on any particular food or any particular thing or whatever. Those kind of amorphous, can't really get a hold of it sorts of things are typically generated by yourself. They're generated from a lack of positiveness, from a lack sometimes of self-esteem, feeling good about who you are and what you're doing and how you're doing it, rather than looking at yourself and saying, oh, I'm miserable. Look, I didn't eat right. I don't do this. I don't do that. Why don't I do these things? And then you start beating yourself up over the things that you are not. And that's a problem. So try to get positive and be who you are. And if you stay positive and you work on getting rid of the fear and the ego and the belief, those problems will just go away all on their own. They'll just disappear, because it's the fear and the ego that creates these non-specific problems for the most part.
Right.
It's your own way you're approaching life. And if you feel inadequate, like you're not doing it right, you kind of get frustrated with yourself, because here you are, I've been working on this thing for 3 years and it's still the same way it was. Sometimes it gets better, but then it gets worse again. What am I doing wrong? I just don't seem to be able to get it right. And you see how that can pile up, and that negativity can actually be the thing that's causing you the problem. So it gets it's like the more you feel failed in it, the more negative you get, the worse it is. So it's just you get a negative cycle going there that then's hard to break. So the thing to do is to just enjoy your life. Be careful about what you swallow, good things. And when you eat good things, feel good about eating those good things. Don't feel like you're doing this because you should. You see, that's eating good things because of duty, because of the intellect says that's what you should do. That's not really helpful. You want to eat those good things because they are good things, and you want to eat good things. You see, that's a positive thing, rather than eating good things because it's what you know you should do, even though there's some part of you that says, I really don't want to do this. I'd really rather have something else, but I'll do this anyway because I want to be healthy. Well, it's just the wrong approach. So that's the thing. Try to change the attitude toward the approach of what you're doing. Don't be negative on yourself. Don't be hard. Just say, well, I'm going to eat well because I want to feel well. And you do it, you like it, you feel good. And if you have those pains and things that come, or indigestion, just use your mind and say, go away. I don't need this anymore. I don't need this reminder that I'm having problems. I'm dealing with my problems now. Just let these reminders about how I'm not, as positive as I should be, let it all go. And don't spend a lot of focus on it. So it's a very positive attitude, a more carefree, a less self-incriminating, less frustrated. Just live your life, live it well, make good choices, and let it, whatever happens, happens. And you'll find that whatever happens, you'll start getting healthier, your indigestion will go away, these things will start working. But as soon as you turn your focus on it, and want your intellect to try to make you do the things you think you should, now you won't get anywhere. Right. You'll just slide away with that. So enjoy life a little more. Have a very positive attitude about the things you do, and don't worry about the things that aren't working right. They'll take care of themselves as long as you are positive, enjoying yourself, doing good things, making good choices. The rest of it will all clear up on its own.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. That was great.
You're welcome. Now, that was easy, wasn't it? I didn't tell you had to climb a high mountain and, do anything like that. I told you to go have fun. That's
definitely
Dr. Feel Good, huh?
Yep. I'm transitioning in my life right now to do more things that I'm passionate about and let go of the things that I'm not. So I think that might
sure
be improvement as well.
Yeah, stay positive. You know, there is a thing called duty, things that you have to do, responsibilities that you have to meet. We have all those things, and we need to do it not begrudgingly, and not because I'm only doing it because of the duty. You need to do it because it's the right thing to do. You've obligated yourself, or you're in a position to have this responsibility. So you do it, and you do it very positively, but you don't let it color your life in a dark color. Do what you have to do. You can't shirk responsibility. You can't shirk your duty. You got to take care of your children, or you got to take care of your sick mother, or there's some things you just have to do. And whether it's fun or not isn't the point, but do it with joy. Do it with, I want to do this. This is the right thing for me to do, and I want to do right things. So it's not your intellect convincing you that, oh, you have to suffer now because of, this or because of that. Don't suffer. Don't ever be a victim. Don't wallow in doing things that you don't want to. Just have fun, enjoy your life, make good choices, do the things you have to do, and that will leave you happy. And happy will make you feel better, and your body will work better.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
That feels better, just hearing that.
Awesome, right on. So kind of segueing into having the right intent, Gail had a question about out of body and how fear is involved with that. Gail, did you want to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Yeah, when we're practicing traveling out of body and wanting to communicate with other non-physical beings out of body, I think most of us want to be communicating with non-physical beings that are more positively oriented rather than negatively oriented. And so I usually do this little ritual or just say this thing about, I want to attract non-physical beings who have my highest good at heart or who are coming from love or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering, to the extent that we have unresolved fears and negativity within us, do we attract more negative beings, non-physical beings, when we're out of body?
Well, metaphorically, the answer is yes, but only metaphorically. Actually, that is very unlikely, if not actually impossible. Okay, you're over anthropomorphizing a little bit as far as what's going on. We tend to make metaphors up that are things we're used to. So if we run into something that talks to us, we say, oh, that's an entity. That's another non-physical being, because in our world, only beings will talk to us, so it's another being sort of like us, but non-physical. So we come to that conclusion. May really not be that. It may be, the larger consciousness system sending you data down a data stream. It may not be this, free actor, cruising around in the non-physical that's just bumped into you. There may be a purpose in that data stream that you get. And the other possibility is that it's your imagination. You see, there are 3 sources for information in your data stream. It could be another IUOC, okay, and that's the being, that's the entity you're talking about. It could be the larger consciousness system, and it could be yourself. All 3 of those are very valid, sources of information. All 3 of those can provide information to you that's very helpful to you, that's very useful. Maybe not in the way you're looking for or thinking of, but useful just the same. And all 3 of those can provide garbage, can provide nothing that you can use. Okay? You never know which of those 3 is the source of your data. That's an impossible thing to know. You just don't know. So what we do is we interact with whatever we interact with. You have no fear, because none of it is going to hurt you. The only thing can possibly give you trouble and hurt you is your own fear. If you get your own fear twisted up around something, then that can hurt you because now you'll be more afraid and therefore less able to grow up. So as long as you're just out there experiencing, knowing your experience is data in a data stream, okay? All these realities are virtual. The out-of-body reality is another virtual reality. It's data in a data stream. So you just interact with that data and you engage with it, interact with it, ask the question, what can I learn from that? You know, what was the lesson in that for me? What sort, you know, what's the takeaway from this experience? If you have a lot of fear, the system doesn't want you there because you're liable to get yourself in trouble with your own fear. Not that you're attracting evil entities that will hurt you, but that you will get wrapped around your, you know, the axle of your own fear, and you'll end up worse off rather than better off. So often the system will put little frightening things in there for you to experience, and if you scream and run home, then you probably don't really belong there. If you face it and deal with it, then you do belong there. You see, now you're ready to engage at that level. So there's lots of fear tests that are going on. So don't take anything terribly seriously, but do engage everything. Okay, so you know, negative entities tend to be artifacts of your interpretation, your fear. So you get the data, but you have to interpret it. And if you have this fear, then things tend to seem menacing when you're afraid. And when you're afraid and they tend to seem menacing, you interpret that as some, you know, negative entity. And then you start, your mind and your fear starts working on that. And it starts to grow, you see, and pretty soon you have this all out, you know, you've been attacked by non-physical beings, whatever, and it's basically just your own fear for the most part. That's typically what's going on. So be fearless. Don't worry about that. Nothing's going to hurt you there. Take whatever the data is, and if you see a, you know, a 2 or 3 headed monster with big fangs, say hello, shake their hand, and ask them, you know, which way to Boston or wherever it is you're trying to go. You know, just interact with them, and you will find that almost always they'll either just poof and go away, or they'll turn into something a lot less scary. So, no fear, I guess, is the antidote. Mostly it's your own fear that you're running into, not negative entities. So lots of people go out and they run into negative entities, and then after that they have a terrible headache, you know, for weeks, or they get this pain in their shoulder, or this happens to them or that happens, and when they try to sleep at night they feel bugs crawling in their scalp, and on and on and on and on. These are things that you're creating with your own fear, even the physical sensations and so on. So that's why people who have fear aren't ready yet for, you know, for a lot of exploration in the non-physical, because they'll end up getting themselves in trouble with their own fear. So negative entities, don't really worry about that. The things that can hurt you are very unlikely to appear, and that is if there are other IUOCs that for some reason you know, want to cause you distress or harm or something, they can send that energy towards you. And that's something that, yes, you get from somebody else. But now you're not talking about a non-physical being that's hurting you. You're talking about somebody that has a physical body just like you do, that's sending you negative energy.
Right.
Now, that can happen. But that doesn't happen here very often. Go over to you know, the West Coast and the East Coast both of Africa, and you'll find that happens a lot.
Mhm.
You know, that's a way to make money over there. You get good at using your intent, and then you charge people money not to hurt them, or not to hurt their children, or not to make them sick. So that doesn't happen here much at all. So it's a rare circumstance that you're going to run into anything that's going to bother you, and in that case, it comes to you. You don't have to meet up with it in the non-physical. It's aimed directly right at you. So.
And when you feel that you are receiving that from another individual, what do you recommend is the best way to deal with it? Just to not engage, or to, you know, raise your own vibration, meditate more, or yeah.
Well, you can, first of all, never become frightened by it, because fear is a handle by which others can manipulate you.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is if you don't kind of open the portal, if you don't let them in, they can't touch you.
Mm-hmm.
But you do let them in if you're afraid, because now that's a connection to them. It's your fear connection to them is the connection they can use, you see,
Mm-hmm.
to bother you. That's why all the people who do these kinds of things, you know, what they call them, the black arts or whatever, the first thing they try to do is to frighten you. You know, they send you a little doll with a pin in it and your name, you know, on it, or they do this or they do that. All of those are just histrionics made to frighten you, because if they can frighten you, now they've got a way to pass things to you. You see, if you aren't frightened by them, they're kind of shut out. And if you feel something bothering you, just shut it out. Say, don't have time for that. Shut it up, but don't start thinking, oh, what is that? What might that be? Oh, that was that voodoo lady that, that I was rude to on my trip to, Haiti or something. She's going to get me now, because once you start that fear cycle, then it just makes everything worse. So if people do that, you just turn it off and ignore it. And if you need a tool to help you do that, well, build an impenetrable sphere around you, surround yourself with white energy, and in your intent, any kind of negative things that comes into your sphere will bounce right off and go back to the sender. So whatever they send you, they get it back.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reflection, like a mirror. So if they send you something that gives a headache, the headache will go back to them and they'll have the headache. And pretty soon they'll stop sending you stuff, because every time they try to send you something, it hurts them. So you just use your intent. But those are really mind games, but they work well. So you just have this intent, you feel confident, and nothing will bother you. It's your own fear that's the problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. And speaking of intent, Tom, that's something that a lot of us have challenges with, is how to form an intent at the being level. So I know, Chris, you had some questions around intent. If you wanted to ask Tom, go ahead.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
I just did, for the first time, had some exposure to your work. So I did this 6-week program with Vanessa, and it was all pretty new to me. Previously, when I've meditated, I just sit quietly and try to observe what's happening without really, directing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And your approach certainly seems to be very, very focused with directing one's intent. I found when I sit, I think I just sit in my ego, because we'll think of a particular thing to work on, whether it's trying to achieve point consciousness or remote viewing or whatever the program was, and I'm not sure how to get it down to that intent level. I think I start thinking about what the instruction is, and then I will close my eyes and try to imagine how to formulate a stronger intention to be working at that level. But I think I'm just pretty much spinning around in my head. How do you cultivate that deeper resonance?
Okay, this is something that is a difficult thing to understand initially, and with practice and with working, it gets more obvious, as you go on. But after I'm done answering your question, you'll still probably be confused, because it's not an intellectual problem.
Mm-hmm.
You see, well, it is an intellectual problem. Your intellect, many people, particularly people who do logic for a living, tend to make their intellect their like sole source into the world. Everything comes through their intellect, and they're not really too aware of other parts of them. The being level part, the intuitive part, it's kind of there, but it's neglected and not trusted. So it's not used and you don't work with it. So it gets to be very difficult to see those other parts of you, those intuitive parts, the being level parts, from your intellect, because all the intellect sees is itself, and everything seems to be intellect. So that's why it's a difficult problem. But the more you work with it, the more obvious it will become. One way I can tell you, how do you know that you're, how should you feel? You're having an intent, and it feels like it's just with your intellect. Okay. Now, the intellect can be part of the being level. It's not that the being level can't think. So if I'm thinking, it must be my intellect. You can think at the being level. It just means that at the being level, you're not attached to anything. Your ego is not attached to it. You're not attached to any beliefs. You're not attached to any fear. There's nothing there but you, the core of you. So it's not a matter of am I thinking it. It's more as am I it. So let's say I want to ask a question. I want to get some answers from the databases, or I want to heal somebody. And you're trying to do this, and it feels like you're just thinking it. Well, you have to be it. You have to want to heal that person, not just because it's a wish, but because you really want to at a being level. So I don't know if I'm making a kind of a distinction, but it's a matter of things that are wishes and things that are being level intents. Wishes all come out of the intellect. Oh, I wish that person would get healed. That'd be really neat because then I'd get some good feedback, or I wish I'd get this data. That's all intellectual. When you connect with the data, you have to have a sense of being it. It's like you have to be what it is your intention is, not just wish it. I know, very hard. What I'm saying is just like, yeah, but it doesn't really make sense to me. It won't make sense to you until you just keep practicing. But the more you practice, the more sense it'll make. And if it helps you any, I was just like you.
Wow.
I started in this, I guess as an adult in my 20s, and I'm a physicist. And if it's not logical and it doesn't come through my intellect, it doesn't exist. It's that sort of thing. So I had a similar sort of thing. I was thinking everything. Excuse me. But eventually you get to the point where you know whether it's a wish or it's what you really want at the core. It's really something that you're connected to at the being level. You really want to heal that person. It's not just part of a test and not just to see if you can do it. And it's not a gee whiz. It's about them. It's not about you. If it's a wish, it's kind of about you. I wish that person would heal. But if it's about them, then it's not about you. You just want them to heal. And that comes from kind of your core place. So that's kind of the difference. The intellectual stuff tends to be about us and about our ego and what we want to happen. I'd like to get this data from the database. Well, that's intellectual. But if you think about that data, why you want it, why you need it, why it's important, what you think it might help, how it might help you grow. Is there any other kind of information that might help you grow? And it's something that's kind of organic, innate at your being level that you want to make this connection. You want to grow. You want to get this kind of information. Then you'll see that's your being level. So people that want to get information like, oh, I want to remote view the girls' locker room. You see, that comes from ego. That comes from the intellect. That's not something that's deep and part of them at the being level. That's just them at the ego level. So it's a matter of getting to your core and connecting, you might say with empathy, but it's not just empathy. It has to be about the quality of the information and what that's going to do as far as your growing up goes. Not just you're just trying to solve a puzzle.
What was it like when you first started noticing that shift? What was different for you?
Well, what I noticed was that when I shifted from the intellect to the being level, things started to work. you know, whereas before I'd have smaller successes at my healing and remote viewing and other things. And when I got into the being level, suddenly everything was a lot easier and seemed to be a lot more powerful. And then I got to note what the difference is. Oh, I feel like this when it works, and I don't feel like that when it doesn't. And eventually you will then learn to separate, you know, those feelings. So just heal people. You know, if you practice that, then just do that and do it 100 times and keep track of it. Ask the people or ask whoever it is that knows that person. And there'll be some times when it'll work really well, and sometimes when it worked not so well, sometimes it'll not work at all. And then ask yourself, what was different? How did I feel when it worked? What was what was my mental state when it worked? And you'll begin to see that there is a fundamental difference between the intellect and the being level. And then it gets easier to kind of drop into that being level, and eventually that's where you live. You live at that being level. And the intellect just becomes a tool that you can use when you need it. But you start living out of your being level all the time and using the intellect as appropriate, rather than the opposite way where we live out of our intellects all the time and we kind of ignore or don't trust, you know, what's down at the being level, because that's that squishy emotional stuff, and you know that can get you into trouble. You need to keep that under control with your intellect. So it's just a different way of seeing the world, but it's a very hard thing to describe to somebody who is mostly intellectual and has been, you know, all their lives. Just work at it, practice, do it, and you'll see that eventually you'll get it. There'll be this difference, and then it becomes really obvious, but you won't be able to tell anybody else. It'll just be obvious to you, but it'd be very hard to tell somebody else. It's a matter of a kind of an attitude toward life and existence and reality more than anything else. It's something that is core to you, as opposed to just something you'd like to see happen.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
That's great. And Chris, I know you had some other questions that we'll revisit in a few moments here. I just wanted to, with the whole being level, yeah, Tom, we often live out of our intellect and can feel like a lot of chatter going on in our head. We have these constant thoughts. And I know, Daniel, you had a question around that, around the constant thoughts. Did you want to ask Tom?
Yeah. Hi, Tom. When I'm meditating, I've noticed that there's all these thoughts that are coming into my head, and it's very distracting. So just wondering if you have any tips or techniques of how you can sort of get rid of the monkey mind that sort of comes in when you're meditating.
The best way to do that is with practice. You know, sometimes, well, some people have a lot more trouble with that than others. Those who have a lot of trouble at it, they may be able to keep kind of a blank mind for 10 seconds. And at the end of 10 seconds, their thoughts pop in. Well, just work with that 10 seconds. Say, okay, that's where I am. To about 10 seconds, I get information comes in that's off the point. I'm doing something else. Just work on it until you get it up to 10 and a half seconds or 11 seconds, and then just hold it there. So you have to work it up slowly. It's a discipline thing. It's very much like learning, like learning how to play the piano. You know, you first sit down at a piano and all you can make is noise. You know, you can't do anything, but you just do a little bit, and pretty soon you can play chopsticks, or you can play Mary Had a Little Lamb or something, after the first 4 or 5 hours, and that's all. And then you just have to keep working at it, and eventually it'll get better and better, where you can get into a meditation state, turn off the outside world and all the thoughts that go with it, and just sit there blank for as long as you want to. Okay. It just takes practice. But what happens to most people is if, they go for even 10 seconds or a minute, and then the thoughts come and it keeps coming. So they kind of throw their hands up in despair and say, I just can't do this thing. I just can't meditate very well. It's something about me and meditation. It doesn't work. Well, they give up too soon. It's not an easy thing to do, but you just have to keep working at it a little bit. Don't get discouraged. You may work on it for a year before you can clear your mind for a half an hour. Well, that's okay. Take a year. Take 5 years if that's what it takes, you see, but don't give up. Keep working on it. And the good news is that as you work on things, as you really are serious about growing up and increasing the quality of your consciousness, the system will start to help you. You'll actually get some help from the system. Now, another thing you can do if you want to use technology is you can use the binaural beats. And it tends to keep you from zoning out and losing everything. A lot of people just zone out and they don't really fall asleep. They just stop functioning. Well, the idea isn't to stop functioning mentally. It's not to zone out and then wake up at the end. The idea is to be aware of yourself as consciousness. Get to know yourself as consciousness. Be alert and awake, but not operating, not thinking thoughts, not working on your day. Okay? But still awake and alert. If you're zoned out, you're not awake, you're not alert. It all just kind of passes by. And yes, if you do just zone out, you still will get a lot of relaxation and you'll wake up with some extra energy. So you still get something out of it, just not as much as if you're there. You don't learn as much if you're not there.
All right. Thanks for the explanation. That really helps me out.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so just kind of changing gears here. Keith, I thought we'd go over to you. I know you had 2 questions, so you can ask either one, whatever feels right for you.
Yeah, Tom, I just had in one or two, if you had any experience or awareness about what happens, what our IUOCs are doing, in between physical incarnations, and how we might be choosing our new life plans.
Okay, sure. So it's very custom fit to each individual. You get either it could be a long kind of drawn out transition, or it could be very, very quick. It's long and drawn out if you have a hard time relaxing, letting go, and moving on. If you are obsessed with maybe something that was going on in your life before you transition, it's more difficult. It's more difficult if you're frightened and have a lot of fear and need a lot of reassurance. It's a little longer if your intellect is always in charge and you don't really listen. You've got ideas and beliefs and concepts about the way things are, and you're waiting for them to be that way. You want to kind of control the process. That takes a little longer. If you get there and it's like, oh yeah, I remember, been here, done this a whole lot. Well, you skip all that stuff and you go right to the process where you try to learn something more out of the last incarnation. And if you're a beginner in the process of growing up, that is a pretty short session. You basically hop in, hop out. It's not a lot of, not a lot of learning in the transition. You just need experience. You just don't have enough experience. It's like being a 5-year-old. When you're a 5-year-old, you just need experience. To sit down and think about things deeply as a 5-year-old to try to figure out how the world works probably isn't going to work, because you just don't have enough experience to really understand what's going on. So it's like that. So if you don't have much experience, it's a hop in, hop out to gain an experience. Once you've had some experience, you transition out and you want to learn something from that. And you will have an opportunity to do that. There will be some other entities there that will kind of ask you what you think you need to work on. What kind of experience set do you think you really need to grow, and and what sort of problems did you have last time that maybe you want to work on next time? And if you really don't know and say, well, I don't know, I don't think I had any problems at all, everything seemed to be fine, then they will start showing you snippets of your past experience that point out some very obvious issues that you may have had. And then, you know, you can talk about those, and you probably deny them. Oh yeah, but that was just because, you know, that was just a one time. So they'll show you 10 more that were just like it until you go, oh yeah, I guess I do have that problem. And then you decide maybe what would be a good, you know, something good for you to be into, you know, a situation for you to get born into that would make it so you could work on that problem. Or if you've really been around a lot, there may be some other individuals that you tend to incarnate with, and you make some kind of plan as a group, several people together, and how they're going to interact with each other and so on. You know, so the more experience you have, the more unique and the more detailed is your transition, in the sense that you plan. You know what it is you want to do, and you want to structure it so that you get a really good opportunity to do that. So anyway, that's the transition. So it depends. So you're an old hand, you've been around a lot, you probably go right to the, what can I learn from this last time? And you'll get some help from that. And you'll have some discussion about it, and you'll decide what it is you want to work on, and maybe what you'd like to do next. Or maybe you don't really want to work on anything of your own. Maybe there's somebody else that you want to help, and there's some way that you can arrange to do that, you know. So it just depends on what you want to do. You have free will. At no time are you ever told what you have to do or why you have to do it. Or even if you have to do anything, you can say, nah, no thanks, I just want to sit out a while. I don't want to do another one. I'm done for a while. That's all right. You're just done for a while. You never are pressured or pushed or forced into do anything. It's always your choice. And the system tries to support your choice as much as it can, based on the uncertainty that, you know, that might happen. Right. So that's kind of what goes on with the transition. When you first die, you kind of wake up in a something that seems kind of dreamlike, except you are, you know, you're met by other beings, or you move toward the light, or somebody says, oh yeah, go on over there and meet Uncle Fred, or whatever. You basically handled in a way that helps you let go, and your previous life just disappears the same way that dreams disappear. You know, you wake up from a dream and it's perfectly clear, every little detail of it. 10 minutes later, not so clear. An hour later, you only have bits and pieces of it. You know, a day later, you maybe have the title or the theme, but all the details gone. That's the way it is when you do a transition. As soon as you transition, it's just like you've let go of a dream, and it starts to fade. And as time goes on, it fades and fades. And that's why, for the people who have a lot of fear or have other issues or are obsessed with something, basically what they do is just, you know, you might say make work. You know, they're just, you know, go over there and stand in line and wait that, you know, you need to talk to that person. It's just biding time for them to relax and let go of those things. So their transition will take a little longer because they need to spend time standing in line, letting the dream of their last life dissipate. So that's kind of what happens. It's important that people, as soon as they start to transition, start to feel everything's okay. This is not a terrible place. You know, I'm not going to be, you know, stuck through with pitchforks and burned in the flames or anything. It's okay, because otherwise they'll get into a fear thing, and they'll begin to see and experience the stuff they fear, and they get wadded up in their own mind at that point. So that's why, you know, you have people that will meet you and, you know, show you your deceased relatives, and you can talk with them, and all of that is a show basically generated by the system to help people relax and let go. That's the kind of number one thing that you have to do there, is just relax and let go. And after that, all the rest of it just happens the way it does. It's a very simple and easy thing. 99.999% of all the people that transition have no problems whatsoever. This idea that there's lots and lots of people who have problems in the transition, and they need help, and they need this and they need that, that's mostly not true. The transitions are easy and generally work out very smoothly. The problem cases just take a little more time, but they're really not all that much harder. They just take more time.
Well, that's great, Tom. That really kind of confirms what I felt for a while, and it kind of almost leads into my other question. And I was curious, not that I haven't really experienced any out-of-body experiences yet, but I've always been curious as to what happens to our physical avatars when we do have an out-of-body experience, and if we're doing that, do we still have free will? I mean, whether or not or when to return to our physical avatars, and I mean, what would happen if we decided we didn't want to?
If you decided you didn't want to, you'd return anyway. No, you don't get to make that choice. I suspect if you could talk the system into making that kind of exception, I mean, everything's possible, right? You're in a system that it's aware. This larger conscious system isn't a machine. It's aware. It's intelligent. It sees the probabilities. It knows what's going on. So almost anything can happen, is possible. It's just not likely. It's hugely unlikely that if you decided not to come back, that you wouldn't just come back anyway. You're not done yet. Well, you're not done yet. You're not done yet. And you would go back because you launched from that avatar's perspective. You're still interpreting everything you get from that avatar's experience base. That avatar is your launch platform. And you see things through the experiences that you, the consciousness, have experienced while playing that avatar. So you are connected to that avatar. The rule set is what makes things happen. I shouldn't say what makes them, but it creates the constraints. It defines what can happen, what can't. It's all, what sort of energy exchanges can take place. What can happen. That's the rule set. It defines the virtual reality. Well, the rule set is what created our avatar in the first place. It evolved according to the rule set. So the rule set says that the heart keeps beating, the blood keeps circulating, all those things happen. The avatar is your base, and it just sits there and does that. Now you're out of body, and somebody comes up to your avatar and throws a bucket of ice water on them. Well, you're going to snap back in a flash, no matter what you were doing.
I got you. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Tom. So Rehana, she also was included in our 6-week experiential, but unfortunately she couldn't be here tonight. She did have a question though. So Ray's question is just around what is the best way to forgive yourself? Is it even possible to forgive yourself? Forgiveness is a really tough one for her, so she just wants some advice around that.
Well, for most people, it's a lot easier to forgive other people than it is to forgive yourself. We are usually our own hardest critic. And when we feel like we've done something that was wrong, that messed up, like our first person we talked to had, that you kind of ruined a relationship, you were lazy, you didn't do things right. When we have those kinds of feelings, we tend to feel bad about ourselves. And forgiving ourselves is a difficult thing. Well, guilt is dysfunctional. Not forgiving yourself is basically a guilt thing, and it's dysfunctional. It doesn't help you, and it will always hurt you. What it is an ego that can't stop blaming itself. Well, blame is dysfunctional. Ego is dysfunctional. All that dysfunctional stuff just goes around and around and around on how you messed up. And forgiving yourself is a matter of just breaking out of that cycle. Okay? So when you're in a negative cycle where you feel bad about yourself, that is, another way of saying it, I guess, is that's sort of like you wallowing in self-pity. Oh, look at me. I was so dumb, those things that I did. Why wasn't I more grown up? Why was I so lazy? And You're feeling sorry for yourself because you messed up. Well, that's called self-pity. So if you get into self-pity, you can just kind of get stuck down that hole, and it makes it very hard to get out. It's the ego moaning about the things it didn't do right. That's self-pity. So you need to basically accept it. Say, okay, that's what I did. That's who I was. Those are the choices I made. Here's why I made those choices, because I had this kind of fear and that kind of fear, or I felt superior, or I felt this or that, and all those things will go down to fear. Or I was just lazy, or I didn't care, or I took the other person for granted, or you can go into all these things. And then you ask, well, why did you take the person for granted? You see, just I took somebody for granted isn't a good answer. You need to find out why you took somebody for granted. Why weren't you more? And it'll come right back to, well, because I was full of myself, because I was self-centered, because it was all about me. It wasn't about them. You see, it all comes back to the same thing. And then when you realize that, then you have to work on that ego. You have to work on that fear. Well, why is it always all about me? Well, it's because I'm afraid that if I don't do this and that, and if I'm not in control and whatever, I'm not going to get what I need and what I want. I need to manipulate things to be the way I want them. Otherwise, it'll all go to hell in a handbasket, and I'll be left, on the side of the road for dead or something. It won't work for me if I don't manipulate it to be the way I want. Well, that's all I. What I want, I need to make it be what I want. It's all ego, you see. And when you realize that, and then the fear behind the ego is that the fear is that you won't get what you want. Well, then if you work on it, it's not easy to let go of fear, but if you try, if you really have a being level intent to get rid of it, you will. What you have a being level intent tends to come true. So you just keep thinking, I don't want to be that way. And then you find yourself acting that way anyway. You go, nope, don't want to go there. You just stop it. And it's not that you stop your behavior, you stop your feeling, you stop your being level from expressing that fear. So eventually, the times you have to stop it get less and less and less until it only happens occasionally, and then it just goes away. But first, you have to accept it. You have to see it. When I say accept it, I don't mean, look at it and say, oh, it's okay. Okay, I was self-centered and I did all that stuff, but that's okay. It's not that it's okay. That's not what I mean by accept it. By accept it, I mean you have to own it. Right. You have to say, that was me. That's the way I acted. That's the way I am. Now, what do I want to do about it? And if you go, I really don't want to do anything about it. I think I'll go have a beer and forget all about it. That is not growing up. And then you'll have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Not always in the same way, but in different ways. Different constructs will happen, and you'll keep repeating it until you decide to outgrow it. And you can do that. It takes time. The hardest one to outgrow is the first one you try to outgrow. They get easier after that. And again, if it takes you 6 months or a year or 5 years to outgrow it, that's okay. Just whatever time it takes, just keep working on it. Don't work on it for 2 weeks and then give up and say, oh, it's too hard. You have to really want to do it. You see, the first one, if you give up because it's too hard, that's because you feel like you should change. That's intellectual. If it's being level, it's not only that you should change, you will change. You won't accept anything but change. You see, that's a being level. It's a core of you now has decided to change. It's not that, well, I really ought to cut that out. I really shouldn't be so self-centered. So the next time I'll cover that up. I won't let anybody see those things. If I feel self-centered, I keep it to myself. That isn't helping. That makes you seem like a nicer person, but it doesn't make you a nicer person. You have to not act like a nice person. You have to be a nice person. If you really want to do it at the being level, you will succeed.
Right. I love that. That's really great advice. Thank you, Tom. And then feeling guilty and beating ourselves up about things, it just delays the process of change.
Yes. You got to wallow around in self-pity for years if you want. Some people for the rest of their life they wallow around in self-pity, and they feel bad about themselves. And I can't have a relationship anymore because if I did, I'd just ruin it. I know I would. You see. Well, now they're suffering. Well, now they're a martyr, you see. Oh, I have to suffer because I'm unworthy. And that's just more wallowing around and more self-pity and making up excuses of why you can't grow up.
Yeah.
So
are you
that's,
insinuating something? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I get what you're saying. A good example I just want to quickly share is that as a parent, as a mom, that's my toughest challenge there. And sometimes I'll yell at my kids. And before I would yell at my kids and then I would beat myself up. I'd be like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm such a bad mom. But now, thanks to these principles, if I do yell at my kids, I catch myself and I shake my head and I say, next time I won't do that. I'll do better next time, right? And it's challenging, but I won't beat myself up so that next time I can catch myself in the moment. And
yes. And that builds. And then you end up having to catch yourself less and less and you start to change. And yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Yeah, feeling bad about yourself is not useful. Guilt, pity, denying yourself things. Oh, I can't do that. I can't do any of these things.
Yeah.
So I'll have to go live in a cave somewhere because, those things just aren't helpful. Own it. Okay, that was me. I was really stupid last week, but I'm going to be better next week. You see?
Right.
Own it and then make a real being level effort to change.
Yeah.
The only thing that can change you is your own desire to change.
Right. And then you also said to look at why I did that in the first place. And then oftentimes we realize because I made it all about me. I didn't make it about other. And just looking at that, actually, Taryn, I know you had a question about when you have this desire or you want to pursue your bliss. Did you want to elaborate on that question that you had?
Or like the sort of sex kind of like, and what benefit is it? And is it that one? Or is it more like, is our purpose here all based on others and to do what's best for others? Or is there any part of this that is based on following your bliss? I personally feel like following your bliss helps others in that sense. I think it raises a vibration in that sense. Is that that question, Vanessa? You want to clarify? Yeah, I guess. Just, I would honestly really like to know what you have to say about orgasm and that kind of thing. Like, what benefit is it? Is there a benefit in it? Like, does it get you closer to? I feel like it's a meditative state in itself, and I haven't heard you answer anything on that. And if you don't mind, I would really like to hear your opinion on that.
Well, it may fall right into your other question about following your bliss. Huh? Maybe we'll do both of those together. I will answer that first question. You said, does everything have to be for the sake of lowering entropy and helping others? And the answer is only, yes, only if you are making a serious effort to grow up, to evolve the quality of your consciousness. If you're not ready yet to make a serious effort to grow up, there's no penalty for that other than kind of wasting your time. It's not an issue. You have plenty of time. And living dysfunctionally, struggling through life, feeling unfulfilled and unsatisfied is kind of the downside of not growing up. So the downside stretches out longer. But no, you don't have to do anything other than be yourself. That is the key thing. You have to be you. You have to be authentic. Otherwise, you can't learn anything. You can't grow up. If you're pretending to be somebody else, there's no lesson in that for you. When you're yourself, now you have to deal with those consequences, and that's real. You can change. So the important thing is that if you don't feel like helping others or lowering your entropy, then you're not ready for that yet. Don't just keep on. Just keep on doing whatever you're doing, and let the consequences, eventually point you maybe in another direction. But you can't force yourself, because otherwise you're just acting. If you say, well, I think I should be kind and nice and sweet, but I really don't feel that way, but I can act that way. Well, that's not going to help you grow up any. It'll make everybody around you feel better because now you're a nice person, and not just, not a not nice person. But other people will like it better, but it won't help you any. So always be authentic, just who you are, and then let the system work however it works. you get feedback, and if you're not nice, that feedback will start to hurt, and maybe you'll learn that lesson. But if you're not ready for that lesson, trying to do it when you're not ready isn't helpful. It'll just make it worse, you see. So always be yourself and always be authentic. All right, well, what about Tantra, sex, orgasm? A couple of things. You know, of course, you know, I never give anybody advice because that's not my thing to do. I give people some understanding and let them come to their own conclusions. So I've got a few things. Vanessa sent me your questions ahead of time. So that was one that I actually wrote some stuff down so that I could remember all the various points that I wanted. I didn't write something down on all of them, but I did that one. The first thing I wrote down, and these are just things to keep in your mind, is that control taken too far is called obsession.
Okay.
Okay, a lot of Tantra is about control. Nothing wrong with control, but taken too far becomes obsession. Obsession is generally not good. Okay, one can harness sexuality in the service of spiritual growth, but then one can also harness juggling tennis balls, or, you know, eating figs or mowing the grass or taking drugs in the service of spiritual growth. You can harness anything for spiritual growth, or you can harness anything. Let's put it in a more general way. You know, one can harness almost anything by approach and by interpretation to serve both our evolution and our de-evolution. You can also harness sexuality, you know, in a process of de-evolution, as well as one of evolution. In other words, one of not growing, of growing backwards as opposed to going forward. And the same with anything. You know, I mean, I had some silly things there, like mowing the grass, but you can go out and be a Zen grass mower. And while you've got that mower and are walking around, you know, I mean, you can be into a great altered state, you know, doing all sorts of things that may be just the thing you need. Or if you're into eating figs, you know, every time you eat a fig, you can say, here's a fig, and you can bless the fig, and you can, you know, thank, you know, the system for the fig that came to you, and, you know, on and on and on. You can turn anything into a thing that helps you grow up, you know, into a spiritual exercise. It's not the exercise itself that's really important. It's the attitude with which you approach it. And if you've done any Tantra, you know that that's what they talk about. It's not just the having sex that is key. It's the attitude with which you approach it. Right. And that's true of everything and anything. So yes, sex can be a process to spiritual development, and also can be a process to a lack of spiritual development. Depends on how you approach it. And it's true of anything else. You know, I know there are some cooks who, because they put so much love and energy and effort into the preparation of food, that becomes a meditation for them. And they gain spiritually just by cooking, you see. So that's one thing. Okay. So you can use all kinds of metaphors, figs or mowing grass or orgasm or anything else. And if you want to use those kind of metaphors or devices, some kinds of devices and things, or rituals, pick them wisely, because most have downsides, and the downsides are very, you know, particular to individuals. It's not that some particular practice will have a downside to everybody, but there'll be some people that it just won't work very well for them. It's not a good modality for them to grow with. You know, so like cooking just wouldn't do a whole lot for me. You know, I'd probably, I'd probably poison the people that I'm trying to cook for. So that's not the sort of thing that I would do. I don't have any skill there, so it wouldn't be that. You see, if you have skills and you have an inclination and you have a, you know, if sexuality is a major thing to you, then that is an avenue that might be a viable, you know, device or ritual or whatever you want to make it to grow spiritually, if you approach it with the right attitude.
Okay, like the right intent. Like to
with
have
the right intent, yes. Okay. If you approach that or anything else with an intention that is all ego, it's all about self, you're not going to learn anything spiritual about it.
Right.
It has to be approached from a position of caring loving, and giving to other. You see, and that's the way it works in Tantra as well as mowing the grass or eating figs. You know, it has to be about other, not about yourself. If it's about yourself, it's about your ego and about your fear, and you're not going to grow up because of it. So that's the key thing. Okay, your sexuality is part of your humanity, okay, supported through evolution by the rule set. It's closely tied to your instincts. If your actions and attitudes get crosswise with your instincts, there is usually a penalty to pay. The penalty may be physical, psychological, and or spiritual. So when we talk about sexuality in particular, that's a little different than mowing the grass or, you know, cooking, because that is directly connected to instincts that you have.
Right. Okay.
And if you do things that are crosswise to those instincts, then eventually, like I say, there'll be a price to pay for that. We have these instincts because of the rule set. The rule set, you know, we evolved to be the way we are because that's the way the rules work. And we start acting ways that are counter to the rule set. Okay, then the body will often have a physical problem with that because the body's designed to follow this path, and you force it to follow some other path, you may start having physical difficulties, okay, or emotional difficulties or something else, because the instincts aren't just all physical. The instincts are emotional and spiritual too. They're a very deep part of us. So keep those things in mind. Control taken too far is an obsession. And if you get crosswise with what seems instinctually right to you, you know, the way you're made, the way you're put together, if it seems like it's like what you're doing is in line with those instincts, then everything's fine. If it seems like they're really crosswise, you're forcing yourself to be or act in a way that just isn't natural to your instincts, eventually that will come back and bite you.
Okay.
So those are the things to be concerned about, because anything can be used for a spiritual tool, and anything can be used to de-evolve, you know, an anti-spiritual tool. It just has to do with what you do with it and how you do it and that attitude.
Right.
So
thank you.
that's what it is. So yeah, Tantra is a real thing. And yes, that does work. But mostly for some people, everybody isn't necessarily got the right mindset, attitude, whatever, to make that a spiritual practice. Okay, it's not a thing. It's not like a cure-all that if everybody did it, you know, everybody would get spiritual. It's not like that. You have to have the right attitude to make that work. And if you do, you have to be careful you don't turn control into obsession, and you have to be careful that you don't get crosswise with your instincts,
Gotcha.
your sexual instincts, because you as a female have a set of female instincts of how you feel, what you do sexually. And it's just instinctual. It's just the way you are. It's the core of you because you're human, and that's the way the rule set worked out. And you can't try to go opposite to that for very long without a problem.
Right.
Instincts always win.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
That's interesting. So if our intent is that we want to modify those instincts, can we do that?
Yes, but if you want to modify your instincts, you have to do it gradually. It's not something that you can just do with behavior. In other words, if your intellect and your instincts get in a war, your body will suffer. You don't want your intellect and your instincts to be in some sort of war. Now, if you want to modify that instinct, you can put a different twist on it. You can change it. You can maybe limit it in some ways. And yes, we can change our instincts, but probably not a lot in one lifetime. It's probably something that takes a few lifetimes of working on it to help us grow to that point. But anyway, don't expect that you're going to move it a whole lot, but you can always, can I say, you can always rein it in.
Right.
Just like you can always give it a long leash, let it do whatever it wants, or you can rein it in. You can work with it. Just don't try to force it to be something it isn't. If you
Nice.
do that, it'll just drive you nuts.
Yeah.
When you and your instincts aren't together, then you get edgy, you get nervous, you get jumpy, you don't feel satisfied, nothing feels right, it's like you're just out of kilter, and stuff just doesn't work out good, and you know what I mean? You just get this thing to where nothing seems to be working right, and you're dissatisfied, but you don't know what to change, and you're pulled and pushed. Something's pushing you this way, and something's pulling you the opposite way, and it just leaves you stressed and confused. And that's what happens if you have a war between your intellect and your instincts. Your body will be the loser, and you will too. The instinct's going to win, and your intellect then will start accusing yourself or feeling bad about yourself and start getting into a negative cycle. So you see, there's lots of things that can happen there. So you gotta work with those instincts. Say, okay, I got these instincts now. I can't just let them run wild all the time, because that just doesn't work anymore. That was maybe good, let's say 100,000 years ago, but it just doesn't work in this culture anymore. So I need to understand them though. If I deny them and say, oh no, I'm not like that, I'm this, you see, now you're going into denial. That won't work. That's going to leave you, again, it's going to leave you, kind of tied up in knots. You got to say, yeah, these are instincts. I'm a human. I've got them.
Yeah.
And then you have to work with them and try to fit them into the rest of your life in a way that's positive, but not fight them. I guess that's the thing. You can rein them in or let them out as you need to. Because you see, you don't want to rein them in, like in the sense, let's say you rein in those sexual instincts completely because they're scary and it gets you into trouble. So you rein them all in, right? Now you've gone too far, you see, because you can't just turn them off. Once you turn them off, now you start to drive yourself crazy. The better thing to do is to just make them more appropriate. Work with them. No, that's not appropriate, but this is. You see, and as long as it's appropriate, then it tends to work. And you, with time, will learn more about just what is appropriate and what isn't, and what works and what doesn't. You'll get smarter, and it all, that's part of your growth. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Sometimes we so much fear that we'll do it wrong that we don't do anything at all, and that's not good. Better to take your best shot and learn from whatever your mistakes are.
Yeah, and be responsible with them, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really interesting take on it, because see, I thought that sex it's all about me, it feels good for me, so then that's coming from ego, but not necessarily. Those are my instincts, right?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it is about you, partly, but it's not necessarily just about you. It depends on your attitude. You can have sex and it's just about you. And you can have sex and it's not about you at all. It's just about them. You see? Right. Now, one of them is serving the ego and the other one is not.
Yeah.
You see? So it's not like, that's what I'm saying. If you just take like because you have trouble dealing with it, you just say, well, the best thing is just no sex. Just cut that out because it's trouble. You see, if you do that, it's like cutting off one hand, It's not the way you're built. You've got these instincts, and if you don't work with them, they'll eat you up from the inside. So you have to accept it and say, all right, there is sex. I can't say there is no sex. I'm a human being. I'm female. I've got sexual instincts. Now, what am I going to do with them? How am I going to make good choices? And how am I going to avoid making bad choices?
Right.
That's the way to approach it. If you approach it with sex is evil, get rid of it, just don't do any of that stuff at all, because that'll keep you out of trouble. It may keep you out of some trouble, but it'll put you in a different kind of trouble. It'll put you in a mental space that isn't healthy. So it's a matter of own it, just like the fear, you own it, then you try to make good choices with it. Those instincts don't have to rule you. They're not your master. You can't say, oh, I couldn't help it. It was just my instincts. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
You got to take responsibility. Yeah, they're your instincts, but you have to work with them. Making mistakes is okay. Learning from them is what's important. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. But of course, you have to look at downsides. If the downside is small, then you can take a little more risk. If the downside is really huge, then you don't want to take much risk. You want to really think that one through. So
Yeah.
judge the downside of a bad choice and let that determine how much effort you make to make sure that choice is a good one.
Yeah, this really speaks to me because I took a vow of 1 year being celibate, no sex for 1 year. And that year is over now, and I did it, no sex for 1 year. A lot of masturbation, but no sex. but now that year is over, I feel like, okay, I'm ready to engage in a new relationship. But then there's this new fear, which is like, but I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to, fall for somebody, sleep with them, they fall for me, and then I decide I don't want to be with them anymore because that's really going to hurt them. So I am making it about them, but then you're there. So like, I just go for it, and then whatever.
You got to figure those things out. Yeah, you have to think about it. You have to say, well, in all the relationships I've had, what has been the really basic problem? What's been the issue, you see, and find your part in that. Don't just blame it on somebody else, but find your part in that issue. Okay, and when you find your part in that issue, that's the lesson you need to learn. So you may not have spent a lot of time trying to learn lessons from your past errors, but you should go back and do it now as best you can remember. Say, well, what was that problem? Oh, okay, I see what it was. I wanted it to be this way, so I pretended that it was. So then I went down that path, pretending that it was, and I could only pretend for so long after it really got to the point I couldn't pretend anymore. And it really wasn't what I hoped it would be. You see, a lot of times that's a belief. We trick ourselves into believing things because we want to believe it so much. We want it to be a certain way. So no matter how it is, we see it that way.
Right.
And then we follow it down, and then it turns out later that, well, it was just our belief that led us down there. It really wasn't like that. And, now that I think about it, from day one, I could have seen that it really wasn't like that. But I wanted it so much, I believed it anyway. Well, see, now that is an error. Learn from that.
Yeah.
You got to get rid of that belief. If you go into something with a big want, I want, well, you're probably going to make mistakes. That's your ego talking. It's what you want. It's a belief. It's what you believe you think you need to have. So if you're chasing a belief and chasing a want, there's about a 90% chance you'll do it wrong. You see?
Yeah.
So you have, those are the kinds of lessons that you have to learn from life. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but go back to every relationship you had that you can remember and see what you can learn from it.
Okay.
But that may take time, maybe take you 2 or 3 months just to learn that lesson from each relationship. It's not like something you're going to do in an hour. If you do, it'll be very superficial. You really have to spend some time with it. And that's how you grow up.
Yeah.
Mostly we make mistakes, we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and then hurry on like nothing happened.
Yeah.
Well, not like nothing happened. We blame somebody else. and then we run on like nothing happened, you see. We don't really learn from it.
Right.
But if you learn from it, then you'll be smarter next time.
Yeah.
And if it starts going bad, you'll see it sooner.
Right.
And then you'll realize that honesty is always the best thing. If you oh, I don't want to hurt him, so I'm not going to be honest, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. The hole gets deeper and deeper the longer you're not honest. So you also know that when you do realize that you're doing something wrong, or it's not honest, or it's not where you need to be, then you need to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may hurt. Well, all right, didn't do that very well and I hurt somebody. Well, I'll learn from that. All right, own it, understand it, try to change it, go on. See?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. I've taken the last year to look at it and learn from it, so I think I'm ready. We'll see. But Russell, you had a question. Russ, if you want to go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yes, I hear you just fine.
Okay, great. So a few years ago, you were interviewed in a short YouTube video where the interviewer was talking about the fits of anxiety that he was experiencing. He said anxieties melted away when he was able to admit and accept his anxieties as a part of himself. Afterwards, you talked about living with those types of uncertainties of life, and I was just wondering if you could speak on living with uncertainties, like you said, and what that kind of looks like in reality.
Okay. One of the ways that most people internalize their fears is a fear of the unknown. They have a fear of what might happen, you know, what if kind of thing, and then there's a fear. Well, that comes out then in their life as one is control. Okay, they want to control things. They have a need to make sure that things don't turn out badly for them. Okay, so you see, this is all self-centered, right? They don't want it to turn out badly for them. It's all about them, their fear, and they need to control things. So that's one way that it comes out. Sometimes people have anxiety, you know, for physiological reasons. They've got too many or too few of a certain kind of neurotransmitter or whatever, and it ends up creating anxiety. Well, you know, that's different. That's a different kind of thing. Most people's anxiety is a fear of things going wrong. It's a fear of being a fool. It's a fear of not measuring up. It's a fear of not being good enough. It's a fear of being inadequate. It's a fear of being insecure. It's you know, those kinds of fears. And those things make people anxious because you can't control life. Life is out of control. And we think that we can control it, and we try our best to manipulate things to fit within our fears, our anxiety, so that we don't trigger the anxiety. But what that does is it drives us nuts because you can't control it. And the harder you try to control your reality to be the way you want it, the less it is the way you want it. And the more the failure makes you anxious. So we get into a negative cycle with that. So the thing is, we have to shift our perspective from one of control to one of acceptance of whatever comes. Okay, whatever comes is what you deal with. In other words, instead of, I only want things to come if they're the way I want them, and I'm going to try very hard to make them come out the way I want them, that's anxiety and that's control. As opposed to, well, whatever happens, I'll deal with it, and I'll deal with it in a way that I'll grow up. Be it a hard thing, be it a thing that, you know, makes me cry, be it a thing that's tough, you know, my girlfriend or my wife leaves me, or, you know, my child does something awful or whatever. If it's something like that, I'll deal with it. Whatever comes up, fun, miserable, happy, unhappy, I will deal with it in the most caring and loving way that I can. I will deal with it to try to make everybody, you know, have the least amount of problems from it. That's what I'll do. So if you have that attitude, then it becomes more fun. Life becomes a game. It's like a puzzle. Somebody hands you, something happens, and you get to figure out how you're going to deal with it. So if you see life in that perspective, stuff happens, I get to deal with it, and I grow up. I evolve the quality of my consciousness by how well I deal with it. If I deal with it poorly, well, I'll deal with it in a self-centered way. If I deal with it properly, I'll deal with it in a loving and caring way. But I will deal with it, and everything changes. And as bad as it might be, I'll get over it. And the things that are the big things, you have to, you know, that might change your whole life around. You know, whatever you can imagine, you know, whatever your big thing. Let's say you're at home watching TV, and your wife and 3 kids are out in the car going shopping, and they get run over by a big truck. Well, that's going to change your whole life. It's devastating. But at the same time, it's going to be an opportunity to move into a whole different reality frame. So you have to accept things as they come, even the bad things, and say, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from it? Here's another adventure coming up. I see it's going to be a tough one, but I'm going to deal with it well, and I'm going to learn and grow from it. So it's a matter of focusing on dealing with whatever happens, as opposed to trying to keep things in line so that they work out the way you want them to. Now, if that means if you feel, let's say, insecure or inadequate, well, then you just have to say, when things happen, I'm going to try to deal with them. And, you know, I may or may not be adequate to deal with them as far as other people are concerned or whatever, but I'm just going to deal with them the best way I can, the most honest, straightforward way. I'm going to be authentic and deal with them. And then I'm going to see the results, see the consequences, and I'm going to learn something and grow up. So it's positive. That way it's all positive. No matter what happens, it's a growing experience. It's a new adventure. It's a new challenge, and you're going to grow up from it. So that way it's like, hey, throw me anything you want, you know, give me your best punch. I will learn from it. I'll turn it into growth. I'll make it a good thing. Not necessarily a good thing, you know, if your family just, you know, got run over by a truck, but I will turn it into something as positive as I can turn it into. I will grow from it. You know, it reminds me of Viktor Frankl, who was a Jewish guy in Germany during World War II, and his family was all put in the gas camps and killed, and he was also in one of those camps, but because he had some useful skills, he survived, but he was beaten and tortured and all this kind of stuff, and he came out of that more positive. He came out of that with a new, it was called logotherapy or logos therapy, a new way of looking at the world and helping people. That's what he got out of it. He wasn't bitter. He didn't, he didn't look at the people that imprisoned him and killed his family as the enemy. He saw them as just people caught up in something that was over their head, and they made bad choices. So you can learn from almost anything. So when you have that attitude that nothing is going to knock you down, that you will accept and deal with and learn from everything, you can start to relax. Because what gets us uptight is that we're going to fail. We're going to screw it up. We're not going to be adequate. We're not going to say the right thing. People won't like us. They'll laugh at us. You know, you'll be out of control. And it's all those things that is what gives us the anxiety to begin with. So when you just say, I'm going to be authentic and give it my best shot and learn from whatever happens, you can relax and just let it go by. That's what I call learning to live gracefully with uncertainty. You don't need to know what's going to happen. You just deal with it, whatever it is, and deal with it in the best way you can. However good or bad that is, it's the best way you can. And the best way you can isn't to optimize yourself, but see if you can optimize it for everyone. Learn from it, grow from it. So I think that's the only, it's about the thing I can tell you. It's a change in perspective about what's important. It's not important to have things the way you want them to be, to have things such that you show up good and don't show up inadequate. That's not important. You can show up inadequate. That's fine. Being inadequate's not a problem. You can learn from it. You see, just be yourself, be authentic, take things as they come. That'll take all the pressure off. It's easier than just to be if you don't have the pressure of, I got to be this way. I got to be a success.
That's great. Thanks for the response, Tom.
That is really great. Yeah. I know we're short on time now, Tom. I wanted to just squeeze in one last question that Teo has. Teo's got students staying with her. She doesn't stay, so it's where she is, but I'll ask the question for her, which is actually
excuse me.
That's okay. It's actually a really common question among many women, which is, how do I, when women, we go into a relationship, and women naturally, we are pretty good at seeing things from other people's perspective, putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. So what happens sometimes with us women is that we make it all about our partner to the extent where we actually kind of disconnect from ourselves, where we lose ourselves in the relationship because we make it all about them. So how can we prevent that from happening?
Well, why do you want to prevent that from happening?
Because then we lose our sense of self-identity. We lose who we are, and it becomes their reality, and we completely dissolve into them, and that's not honoring ourselves.
Okay, well, there's kind of a mismatch here of ideas. When you make it all about somebody else, that's called love.
Mm-hmm.
Love is a good thing. Love is not something that that you lose yourself in. Love is something that you give unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
Love is something that you know, that you give without necessarily expecting anything back. It's just something you give. That's love. That's a good thing. But you do that knowing that you're doing that. You know, if your own personality disappears in that process, then there's something wrong. There's something wrong with that. That's not love. Love doesn't make the person who's loving disappear. That person is giving, and it's unconditional. And, you know, that's just the way it is. It's a gift, but you're still you. And you still, you know, you can make choices and you can assess things. I mean, if losing yourself into somebody else would almost seem to me that you feel kind of unworthy yourself, that you tend to give yourself up to somebody else's choices and somebody else's opinions, and instead of making your own, you know, choices and opinions, you kind of become, I don't know what, kind of a piece of that other person. You no longer have your own free will anymore. You've given your free will up. Somebody else is making choices for you. You know, should I wear this? Should I wear that? Should I do this? Should I do that? You know, you need to make choices of your own. So I think there's a problem here. Love is caring about someone else. Okay. But it's not turning into, you know, a zero or a cipher yourself. That is, I think, mostly a lack of self-esteem, where you let other people make your choices. You need to make your choices. See, if you come, love is sometimes saying no. Love is sometimes saying, I can't do that. Love is sometimes saying, I think that's the wrong direction. When you care about people, you just don't do anything they want. That's being their slave. That's not love. Love, you are still in charge of all your own choices, your free will. If you love somebody and you see they're doing something destructive, you should say no, because it's about them. It's not about you. So they're doing something destructive, or they're acting in a destructive way, and you can say, no, that's not good. I won't participate in that. I won't do it that way. That's not good. It's not good for me. It's not good for you. Now, they may do it anyway, and you may just have to deal with it, right? Stuff happens, you get to deal with it. But you maintain who you are. Now, if somebody says, no, I want to, you know, let's go do this. And, you know, let's say it's your boyfriend, and he says, well, I'm going to rob a bank. I want you to help me. You know, I want you to drive the getaway car. And you go, well, okay, if that's what you want, you know, I'll do whatever you want, because, you know, you're in charge and, you know, I'm just nobody. Then that you're giving up your free will to somebody else. So there's two different things there. Sometimes when you care for people, you have to tell them they're, you know, that they're headed in the wrong direction, and realize that they have to make their own free will choices. So if they choose to go off in that wrong direction, you may have to say, well, I can't go there with you. If you're going to rob that bank, I'm not going to be your driver. I'm not going to be involved in it, because that is not a good thing. I'll be someplace else. That doesn't mean you don't love them. You still love them, but you're not enabling bad behavior. You see, that is loving them. Just to go along with them is enabling their bad behavior. It's not helping them at all. You're hurting them. So you see what I mean? When you care about people, you don't just become a rag doll. When you care about people, you still have choices, and you still do what's right. And the best thing to do for the boyfriend who wants you to help him rob a bank is to say no. And you shouldn't do it either. You know, here's the downside, you know, and there really isn't any upside. So you said, and you won't participate. That is love. Going along with it just because he's your guy and you do whatever he asks, that's being a slave. That's giving up your free will to somebody else. So there's just two different things there. yes, females are better at relationship. They see relationship as their space. Females live in a relationship space. Males live in a exterior world space. That's their place. That's what they manipulate. That's what they work in, is the exterior world. Women work in the interior world, you know, relationship with other people. So they are a lot more sensitive to relationship issues. But never give up your free will. Love does not require you to give up your free will. Love doesn't mean do whatever the other person wants. You still have your own choices, and you're still responsible for those choices. And you need to call it the way it is. That's love. Sometimes what do they call that? Tough love, right? You don't necessarily give people what they want. You don't participate in something that's going to hurt them. So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's all loving because they're going to, you know, try to please and do whatever the other person wants, but there's a part of that where it's wrong. It's not really love. Loving somebody, you sometimes need to stand up and oppose them, because that's the loving thing to do. You know, some guy's walking around with his fly down, and the loving thing to do is say, hey, your fly's down, you know, not to just ignore it because you don't want to embarrass him, right? You need to, sometimes it's tough love. You say things that hurt or embarrass or cause trouble because it's really the best thing to do. If you have a real good friend and your friend is doing something self-destructive, if you're a good friend, you'll tell them, stop, that's self-destructive, you're doing it wrong. A good friend doesn't just go along and not say anything because I'm a friend and I don't want to upset them. That's not being a friend. That's looking out for yourself so you don't have to deal with an upset relationship. You see? So that's the difference. Never give up your free will. And there's no inconsistency between caring and loving unconditionally and not giving up your free will. You have to do both of those things.
Yeah, that's great.
You got to tell your friends when you think they're wrong and why. And they may blow you off and say, well, that's the way you look at it. I see it differently. Then you have to respect that they have their own opinion, and you should not feel like, you know, you're hurt or something because they don't listen to you. Well, they're adults. They have their own opinion. They'll do it their own way, but you can't help but warn them because you love them. You care about them. So you warn them. And if that makes them angry with you so they don't want to talk to you anymore, well, that's the way it is. You still love them, but you don't talk to them anymore because they're angry with you because you tried to help them. That's part of tough love too. So relationships sometimes go away because you care. You see? Because you love them, sometimes that kills the relationship. It's just the way it is. Then you deal with that.
Yeah.
You see? Being in love, caring about people doesn't make you a doormat. Caring about people makes you powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Tom, you gave me some really good advice last year in LA when I was stuck, or the year before when I was stuck in a relationship that wasn't going well. And you said if you find yourself in relationship after relationship with the same problems, then you need to look at your criteria for choosing partners. Like, what's your criteria for your partner? Is it needs-based? Or does it have to do with the quality of their consciousness, with their ability to love, the capacity of their love? And then when I really looked at it, I saw that, yeah, actually my criteria was coming from a place of need. So it had nothing to do with love. That really helped a lot. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole key. Again, making mistakes is not a bad thing. Making mistakes and doing things wrong is just an opportunity to learn something and grow up. If you take the opportunity. Most of us don't. Most of us just blame the other person, walk off, and never give it another thought. We don't learn anything from it. You know, that's kind of typical. We just don't ever question ourselves and why. Why do I do this? What is it about me? And almost always you'll find it's that belief, it's that ego, it's that fear, and that's why you do that. And now you have to work on that and be wary of it next time that you don't follow the same, you know, get in the same trap.
Yeah, exactly. So then on that note, so how does one make sure that they don't approach a new relationship from a place of need? trying to fulfill an ego need, and rather have it come from a place of love.
Well, just like trying to separate the being level from the intellectual. How does somebody know they're in the being mode and not in the intellectual mode? Well, you don't really know, and there's really no way to know for sure. All that stuff doesn't, you don't get, somebody doesn't send you a message ahead of time telling you, what's going to happen. You just have to live it. Every moment, every choice you make, think about it. Think about why you're making the choice. Is this choice being informed by your fear, by your belief, by your ego, by your needs? Is that what's informing it, or what? And of course, you won't know. You'll say, well, I don't think so, but maybe. Well, if you think maybe it's okay, then take the next step. But just take a small step. Don't leap off the cliff. So you take another small step and then see how that works out, and then evaluate it again. Well, now what do I think? See how that worked out. Okay, is it still looking good? Well, take the next step, but just a little step, you see?
Yeah.
So it may take you a year of getting to know somebody, you see, before you know, maybe a series of 100 little steps. You see, in each one, you're thinking about why are you doing what you're doing and how's it working? One little step. But if it's like you meet somebody and, you're married a week after that, and then it doesn't work out the week after that, well, you weren't doing due diligence on your good choices. You wanted something so bad that you decided to leap off the cliff to see if you couldn't grab it. So you always got to do good, due diligence with your choices.
Right.
So you don't know. You'll never know. Just do it and see what happens. It's the same within my intellect or in the being level, at the being level. What am I doing here? Well, if you wait till you have a firm answer for that, you'll never do anything. You'll be stuck in confusion. Just do the best you can and see what happens. You're healing people. Does it work or does it not work? Well, try it a little different way. See what happens. Be an experimentalist. Try different things. You're in the middle of a relationship and this doesn't seem to be working. Well, try something else. See if that works. If that doesn't work either, try something else. And maybe you find that nothing works. Well, probably not a good relationship to be in. But you see what I mean? Be an experimentalist. Don't have to just wait for stuff to happen.
Right.
Experiment. Say, well, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but let's take the next step, put the next toe in the water and see how that one feels. So you go through your life like that, not really frightened of taking a step, but making sure it's your best step. You see that you're making your best choice that you can make. Well, that's all you can do. Then do it. Don't look back and don't feel guilty if it doesn't work out. You're growing up. You're going to make mistakes. Accept that. You're young. You got a lot of mistakes yet to make. How young you are. I'm still making mistakes, you see, and I'm 73 years old. You got a lot of mistakes to make. So don't be afraid of making them, but just go slowly. See what you're doing. Stay in tune with what's really going on, your motivations, not your ego, not your wants, not all that, but really what's going on. Stay in tune with yourself, not just in the intellect. Get into the being level. How do you feel about it? Does it feel right? Or are you kind of dragging yourself down that path? Even though it doesn't feel right, you're convincing yourself it must be anyway. You see?
Yeah. That's hard in relationship though, because in relationship, like the last love of my life, it felt so right because I think it's like all the endorphins and it's like, I don't know, but it messes with me. And I feel like it's my intuition saying, yes, this is the one. But then I look back on it, I'm like, he was not the one. What's going on?
Yeah, we'll learn from that. What could have you seen? What could have you been aware of up front that you blew off and weren't aware of? Think what that was. Don't make that mistake again.
Yeah. Okay.
See? Think about those things, because now you look back at it and it's clear. Oh, I should have known better.
Right.
Well, why? What do you see now you didn't see then? Well, look for those things. You see? You just keep learning.
Yeah.
Just keep learning. Just keep growing. And stuff happens. You deal with it. And don't be afraid to deal with it. You don't need to know the answer before you take a step. You just need to know the potential. Is there potential there in that relationship? Do you feel the potential? Feel the long-term potential. Is there potential there in a decade or two? Just run it and fast forward in your mind for a while and see.
Okay.
And, you know, if you think, well, yeah, I think there's a pretty good potential there, well, then take the next step.
Okay.
Just don't take any steps that are hard to backtrack. You know, so you had just this boyfriend and it's like, well, okay, you think he's the one? Decide you're going to live with him for 5 years. Just live with him. You know, you don't have to marry him, or you don't have to do that. Make sure that you're using birth control. You don't have children to complicate things. And then you just live with him, and 5 years later, you reassess. And if it's working out good, we'll say, well, we'll try another 5. You see, it's not working so good. You say, well, I think I need to go somewhere else. It's been nice. Thank you. Goodbye. So you just have to take small steps. Don't leap into the end game immediately.
Yeah.
Leave yourself a back door until until you have got enough information. You've been there enough time that you know what it's about. You've been there. You've seen it raw. You've seen it the way it is. Now you know. Now you can decide. Do you leap off the cliff at that point because you know? Well, sure. At that point, go finalize it. Go to the end game. But until then, just
have an open mind.
Have an open mind about how things go, and always try to figure out why you're doing whatever you're doing. All your choices. Question your choices. Why am I making that choice? And if you get yourself all worked up into a knot of confusion because you have 3 arguments for it's a great choice and 3 arguments for it's a bad choice, stop thinking about it. Feel about it. Feel about it for a week or 2, and then take a small step in the direction you think is most promising, whether it's forwards or backwards.
Okay. That's helpful. Teo, did you want to add anything, or you're good there? Okay, well, Tom, I know it's approaching like 11 o'clock for you over there. Was there any question that maybe stood out that we had sent you that we hadn't spoken upon, or?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see. Well, there was one that you had at the end that we haven't done. That's kind of a long one.
Yeah.
There was one where somebody said, is there anything different about kids these days? They seem different.
Yeah, those Karen.
Well, everything's different. That's evolution. We're different these days too. Kids are different these days. Evolution is change in reaction to change. Things change and we change, and because we change, other things change, and then we change because of that change. And that's the way evolution works. Kids tend to be more blatant, more obvious, more passionate, noisy, idealistic, in your face, because they lack a lot of maturing experience. So they get a lot of attention, but reality has a way of toning that exuberance down as they get older. And hopefully reality will focus that exuberance more productively for the benefit of their elders, who are often stuck in a rut going nowhere. So we need kids. We need fresh ideas. We need some idealism. That's good. But remember, kids are kids. They live in dreams, and they don't really have a very strong dose of reality just yet until they grow up and have to deal with the real world and real life the way it is. But in 50 years, those kids are all going to be as old as I am. So. And usually what starts out as a very rebellious generation doesn't necessarily end up that way by the time they pass the 40 and 50 mark. So yeah, kids are different. They're always different.
Thank you.
And they always grow up. And hopefully enough of them keep their idealism, so even as they grow up, they'll be constantly looking for bigger pictures.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Can I just squeeze in one other question? I didn't write it down.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Go
ahead. Squeeze it in.
we have a book club, right, Tom, where we've been going through your book. Every week we discuss the chapters that we're reading. And so now we're on book 3. We're finally on book 3, and we're learning about how time works. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and you kind of, I think you have like 6 chapters on time, describing the nature of time and how time increments work in the simulation. So
Mm-hmm.
the question is, you had a part in your book where you said the simulation can be paused. So any amount of real time between consecutive time increments subsequently started up again without disturbing the results in this simulation. So I'm understanding that in NPMR can pause time here in this VR.
Yeah, this VR is a VR. That means it's computed.
Yeah.
Okay, and when it's computed, every time they increase delta t by 1 unit, things change here.
Yeah.
If they don't increase delta t by 1 unit, nothing happens. So they could not increment delta t 1 unit for a year,
Oh.
and then increment it, and suddenly the next instant would happen. So nobody would feel like they were standing still. Nobody would miss it. It would seem like it was entirely continuous. It's like a movie. You turn off the movie, you can wait for a day and turn the movie back on at exactly the same spot, and it just takes right up and goes from that spot.
Yeah, hypothetically speaking. But do they actually do they do that?
No, I'm just talking about the possibilities, the way, so to help people understand the way the system works. No, it's not done that. But let's say that something major happened that needed some fixing, right?
Yeah.
And let's say that fixing was going to be a very tedious process.
Okay.
They could do that. They could just stop it and then do some fixing and then start it back up again, because they have to have all these calculations and probabilities and everything ready for the next set of choices.
Right.
So they may get to a point that they say, oops, this is going in a bad spot. Maybe we need to change a few things here in the background. Maybe we don't need to do that. And they could just put it on hold. So it's possible. And I'm just talking about possibilities, not that this is something that happens all the time. It's just possibilities. So the whole point of it is to let people know that even though these delta T's seem like they come pretty fast, the system can take as much time as it needs between them to do whatever it needs to do to prepare for the next one. You see? So it's not like that the system is always on a shoestring trying to keep up. If the system wants to take some time between delta T's to do whatever it needs to do, it has all the time it can use to do that.
Gotcha.
That's the way it is in a computer. That's the way it is in a movie. You can stop a computer and that process just hangs there. And then when that process starts back up again, nothing in the process knows that it was hanging. It just is frozen in that moment. All the ones and zeros just stop changing, and they all just stay exactly the way they were until it starts incrementing time again. You see?
Yeah.
So it means the computer doesn't have any issues with throughput or keeping up or anything else. That's not a problem.
Okay. But they don't. Are you aware of any time that they may have paused it?
No, I'm not aware of any time in particular that they may have. But you see, we wouldn't be aware of it. There's nothing that we're going to be aware of. The only way you'd be aware of it is if you were in the computer room, not in the VR.
But you spend a lot of time there, though, don't you? Aren't you part of the lab staff? So.
Yeah, I sort of am part of the lab staff, but I've never been there while somebody's decided that they were going to stop it or something like that. That's not the way it. That's not the way it is. So no, it's just a possibility. It helps people understand the bigger picture if you show all the possibilities, and it makes the point that in a digital reality, anything is possible.
Right.
There's almost nothing that is impossible. So we live in a reality that has tremendous potential and can be changed all sorts of different ways that we can't even imagine. So just kind of think, and we're like that too. We have infinite potential, each one of us. We can grow in ways that right now we can't even imagine. And all the trip, what they say, the journey of 1,000 miles, starts with a single step. And that single step is you trying to make a better choice. That's the single step, and it'll take you places that you couldn't imagine.
Mm,
Mm.
love that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That is awesome. Thank you, Tom.
So
you
much.
very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. Now, Vanessa,
Thanks, Tom.
hopefully you've got this all recorded, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you're going to put it out on YouTube or someplace where everybody else can learn from the things we talked about?
Absolutely. Yeah. So everybody can hear about my masturbating for the last year.
Well, better than that, everybody can hear that you're now ready. That's what you did.
Yeah.
You might want to do a little editing there, Vanessa.
No, I wouldn't.
Awesome. Yes, we will definitely put it up. Thank you so much. Really
Thank you, Tom. Thanks.
Really?
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
You're very welcome.
Good, thanks.